purpose of today is we're going to walk people through kind of how you're going to set up your Webex organization in Variphy. We're not really going to stick to Variphy. In all honesty, Variphy is the quickest part of the whole process. But all in all, we can whiz through this whole thing in about 5 minutes. So I'm going to start with the Webex piece, and then we're going to show you the couple clicks you have to do in Variphy to really just get Variphy connected. So within Variphy, there's a couple different things you're going to need to do. Now, we're going to cover both the Webex calling integration as well as the Webex Contact Center integration. They're really kind of two separate parts, so you'll understand exactly where we're going. First thing first we want to do is we want to go ahead and set up our Webex user. Now, keep in mind, what I'm going to do here is set up a local user or a non-single sign-on user. If you guys are using single sign-on for your Webex calling or your contact center, you do need to start with your IDP or your service provider to get the Webex user in here. Once the Webex user is in Webex, in your users list, this is really where we're going to pick up. So we need the user there. So we're going to start off by first creating the user just by going to our Webex Control Hub as an administrator, logging in, going over to our user section, and then we're simply going to add a user here. So I'm going to add a guy here, and we're going to add Mr. Don Huffman, and we're going to give him an email address, and we're just going to use don.huffman@variphy.com and just simply add that user into our Webex organization and click Next. Pretty straightforward so far, not a whole lot that we needed to do at this point. Now, what we're doing is we're signing what license this user is going to have. Now, again, my particular user is going to be contact center, so you're going to see kind of the differentiation here. What I don't need is I don't need basic messaging. I am essentially creating a Variphy user account or a service account. We do strongly recommend creating an account strictly for Variphy or strictly for other services. The reason being is if I created this with just a general user like John's account or something like that, if John should leave the company, it's going to break your Webex connection. If John changes his password, that also alters the tokens. That's also going to break the connection, and the system will need to be re-authenticated. So we do strongly recommend just creating a standard service account for Variphy that can be used strictly for Variphy, that doesn't have all of the complications that could go with using an employee account. From a meeting perspective, we don't need anything for meetings. From a calling perspective, in all honesty, we don't even need calling. So I can pretty much toggle all these guys off. Now, I am creating a combination role here. So I'm going to create a Webex user that's there for my Webex calling, but also a user that's there for my contact center. Now, if you don't have contact center, you're just going to skip this part. If you're strictly using just Webex calling, you just don't go to the contact center part. You're not even going to have it as an option. But for us, we're going to create a contact user at the same time. So I'm going to choose a licensed agent from here, and then I'm going to go ahead and pop back down. Why Webex does this, I don't know, but it always pops you back to messaging every time you make a change. So I chose licensed agent, and then what we need here is a premium agent with supervisor role. This is important. We need that supervisor role in order to be able to view all of the agents. We also need that supervisor role to be able to determine any of your custom idle codes, because only supervisors have access to that. A premium agent does not have access to all of your agents. Only a supervisor or supervisor role will have access to the different agents. So we do need that premium agent and supervisor role. So with that said, we're just going to go ahead and click Next, and it's going to bring us down to the next part where we can go ahead and add our user. We're assigning our license, Webex Contact Center Supervisor. There's our friend Don, and we're going to add the user over there. So Webex is going to do its thing. The user is now added. Fantastic. All right. So now that we've got our user added, we're going to continue in the Webex Control Hub user section here. We're not going to move over to Contact Center. We'll do that in a minute. But we can see that Don here is not verified. So we're going to go ahead and edit Don. And we do need to give Don some specific permissions here. So when I edit Don's user, I'm going to go down to the administration section, and I'm just going to give him admin rights. So he does not need to be a full admin, but he does need to be a read-only admin. This is for the Webex calling side of the house. This is going to give us access to the APIs that are going to allow us to pull the metadata from your Webex organization. Metadata are things that are going to be like your departments, your hunt groups, your general queues, not to be confused with contact center queues. First names, last names, those are all what we call metadata, and we do need that full admin or that read-only admin permission to be able to get that. Now, the next thing that we need, and this is probably one of the most important ones, is the ability to get call history details from the API. A lot of people miss this one. They say, hey, we're set up. We go in there, we get some error messages. We find out that this guy was not toggled on. Again, easy enough fix, but if we can avoid that in the beginning, that's what we're here for today. So right now, essentially, we've set up our Webex calling user. So this guy's going to give us our Webex calling access. We're going to save that, and then off we go. We're good there. And done. So we've got our Webex calling user. Now we notice he's still not verified. All right. Now that's going to be a problem down the road. So this user that we're setting up here does have to have a legitimate email because he has to get verified. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Don's email over here. And as you can see, we've got our email from Cisco saying, hey, this user's not here. Let's go ahead and activate him. So we're just going to click on activate and activate our friend Don. Give this a second to go ahead and load here. And we're going to create Don a password. And we're going to identify how people are going to see Don. And for the most part, that's it. We really just activated Don. But this stresses the importance of this does have to be some kind of valid user. Don Huffman is actually a reroute that just goes to my standard email, but it's here because I need to be able to go ahead and access this user. Now, I get this message on a regular basis. I'm not too concerned with it. And the reason being is it does actually activate the user. So if I go back to Control Hub and I check out my users, we're going to see that Don is activated over here, and he is now active. I don't know. It's not a verified thing. It's a Webex thing, but it is what it is. So the user does still activate. And that is really the key of being able to authenticate with this user is to make sure he's activated. Now, if I was setting up just Webex calling, that's it. That's really all I need to do from the Webex side of the house. Give him those permissions that we just gave him under our administration roles. Again, read-only admin and Webex call detail history. That's it. Now we can go ahead and authenticate Webex. However, in this particular instance, I'm going to set up both Webex and Contact Center. So we're going to move over now to our Contact Center side of the house, and we're going to give Don the necessary permissions so that way he can also gather Contact Center information. So for that, I just scrolled down and clicked on Webex Contact Center. And now I'm going to go to my Contact Center users, and we're really going to kind of repeat a bit of the same process. We're going to go to our friend Don. And we've already given him supervisor access, but now we need to turn that on. So he's using my supervisor profile because we did that when we first set him up. But I'm going to turn on Contact Center. I do not need to give him a primary team, but Webex does require that he goes into a site. And then I'm going to select the teams that are available in my Contact Center. It is important to have access to these teams for Don here because Don is the one that's going to be authenticating against the APIs. And in order for Don to be able to pull down the user information and the queue information and the team information for these teams, he has to have access to those teams. So it is imperative that we do give him access to the teams. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and select a desktop profile, if I could speak correctly. And that is a requirement for Webex to be able to have a desktop profile should Don need to log in. But again, Don doesn't really have any phones or Webex calling, so we don't really expect Don to be logging in. He's strictly really just a supervisor profile. So that's pretty much it from the Webex Contact Center side of the house as well, is we really just edit our user, assign a site, assign the teams, assign a desktop profile, and save. And Don has been successfully updated. And that's, for the most part, all we need to do in the Webex side of the house. Everything's done. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to navigate over to Verify, and we're just going to complete the implementation. Like I said, I should be able to get you guys out of here a little bit early today. Now, one of the things that I like to do when I'm doing these is if you guys are using SSO, or even if you're not, if I were to go ahead and try to authenticate this user right now, it's probably going to push the Webex information for my local account, my Victor Vrba Webex account, not Don Huffman. Now, because this is a separate account, different than my standard one, and caching is just going to try to push up my normal login and my normal credentials, again, caching is doing exactly what it's supposed to doing. It's saying, hey, this is Victor's machine, so we're going to authenticate with Victor. Now, in order to get around that, I do recommend that people open up Verify in an incognito browser, because that's going to make you actually have to authenticate that Webex user. That's not always the case. It does depend on your security within your organization, but I do recommend opening up in an incognito browser just to prevent it from automatically trying to log in with your own credentials and authenticating under your credentials, which are not Don's credentials and don't have the necessary privileges. So I'm just going to copy my URL and we're going to open that into an incognito browser and do that guy and just paste that in there. Now, a couple different things we could do. One, I can go ahead and sign in through my SSO, and that's fine. Everybody's familiar with this. It's just going to make you sign in. Maybe it'll pop up on your phone and you have to authenticate it, all that fun stuff. I don't want to have to do all that just in the interest of time. So I'm going to use our bypass URL. Bypass URL just says, hey, you know what? Use this URL to get around single sign-on and allow me to log in with a local authenticated user. So we're going to do that for this demonstration. You can do that in your organization too if you wish, or just go ahead and fill it out and click everything on your phone or wherever it pops up in your organization or your key fobs and all that fun stuff. But for this instance, I'm just going to go ahead and get around this, and I'm going to do insight/login. Whoop, if I could spell. And this is going to get me to a friendly login prompt that's going to allow me to use just local authentication. In this case, I'm going to log in with the Variphy administration account here. And now I am in incognito mode, just logged in with the local user. And we are going to go ahead and add our Webex org. So to do that, don't care about anything going on over here. I'm just going to go to the gear on the top right-hand side, and I'm going to go to my Webex organizations. Now you can see I've got a few of them in here already, so we're just going to add another one to walk you through the process. And we'll call this Victor Webinar on Webex Auth. All right, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to click this authorize button. Now, this is where I told you if you're just logging in on your regular browser, you could get into trouble. And it's not a big trouble. It's just going to try to log in, and you may have to authenticate a different way. It's not a problem. It's just that it won't work if I tried to log in with Vrba or Victor.Vrba at Webex, because, again, that's not Don Huffman. So when we are presented with this screen, we want to log in with that Verify service account. There we go. Whoops. Let me go back because I spelled that wrong. There we go. And we'll give it our password. All right. So we are good. We're authenticated over to Webex. It's saying, hey, these are the scopes. These are the permissions that this person is going to have. And these are all listed out on our knowledge base as well. So if you don't want to have to do a quick read, you don't have to. Do recommend only ask when requesting new permissions. In other words, it's only going to ask this particular message if we add some additional permissions that are needed, which is a rarity. So I'm going to accept all the permissions. That's going to say, hey, you've successfully signed into Webex. You can now close this window. And now when we pop back over to Webex or Verify, you're going to notice this authorization successful. Please save and continue. Now, if you get something other than that in here, it usually means there's something wrong with the permissions, or it's unable to communicate with Webex. But most of the time, it has to do with permissions. Maybe it automatically tried to log you in with your regular account and just popped up and said authorize, or something like that. But that usually has to do with permissions. You could double check the permissions. You could always come back and reauthorize this as well. Again, recommend doing it in incognito mode, and that's just going to give you the same prompt that we just went through. But now that we are authorized, we're successful, we're going to click save, and this is going to create our new Webex organization. There we go. We can do, and I strongly recommend doing a cluster check on that organization. This is basically going to go out, read all the APIs, read all the connectors, and say, yep, you're cool, everything is good. We're all hoping for green and successful. If we get something that's red and unsuccessful, again, that usually indicates something wrong with our permissions. But all these guys came back successful. It's going to give us some general user counts and things like that, what we have for our Webex calling license, as well as our Webex Contact Center license, and we're good there. I'm going to close this out. We're just going to wrap up the implementation here, and I'm going to go to my CDR processing section. Now, what you'll notice here, this is a little bit different than before if you just had Webex. You have actually two Webex organizations, but the product types are indicative of what you're actually authenticating for or activating. So in this case, because we have both Contact Center and we have both Webex Calling, we are going to activate both Webex Calling and Webex Contact Center. To do that, we simply click on this guy here. we enable the database processing, we select our database server, and then we give our database a name. I'll just call it Victor Webex. We'll just call it Victor Webex. Now, I'm not putting Victor Webex calling here, and I'm not going to put Victor Webex Contact Center on the next one, and you're going to find out why in a second. So I'm going to save and continue. This is going to pop up and say, hey, you know what? Your database does not exist. Would you like to create it? And in this demonstration, yes, we would like to create it. We're going to let it go ahead and do its thing. This could take a second depending on, where you're writing it to, what your database looks like, how busy your database servers are, things like that. But so far, all we've really done is step by step is we've created the Webex calling user. We've added the Webex Contact Center configurations. Now we're creating the database. And once this is done, we're going to do the same process on the Webex Contact Center side. However, we will not create a new database. The Webex Contact Center and the Webex calling databases use the same database. So we don't really want to create one for calling and one for contact center. So we just use the same thing, and you'll see how it just carries over for us in the next step. There we go. We've created our database. We're going to activate that guy. We can, yes, sit here and wait. Depending on the size of your organization, this could take a few minutes. This could take several minutes. This could take 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Just depends on the size of your organization. Essentially, what it's doing now is it's going back and it's actually going out to your Webex organization and pulling back all that metadata. It's not pulling back calling information yet. That's still to come. But it is pulling back all that metadata, the first names, the last names, the departments, the hunt groups, and things like that. But we don't have to wait for this. We're just going to click Finish and Schedule Sync. Sync is exactly what pulls back your metadata on a regular basis. So in this case, I want to go ahead and pull back that metadata on a regular basis. I'm a stickler for staggering these guys. I don't like anything running at midnight because everybody kicks off background processes at midnight. So I always like to change this to 12, 10, or 1, or 2, or 3, or 4 o'clock in the morning. Now I save. My sync is scheduled. Now, one of the things that you're going to notice, we beat the clock here. Sometimes when you come back in, this may still say disabled. That is okay. That means it is still running your sync. So if this says disabled when you come back in, don't go back in, try to reactivate anything. It's just doing what it's normally doing. Like I said, if you have a larger organization, this could take 20 minutes to go ahead and sync all that data to verify, especially for the first time. So this may say disabled for a while, and that's perfectly okay. We went through the motions, so it is doing what it's supposed to be doing, and it is pulling that sync information. It will not enable until the sync is done. The reason that is because as we're processing data, which is what happens when we enable this, we're marrying data to that sync data. But if that sync data is not there, well, then we're not properly marrying the information. So the reason that this may stay disabled is because we are waiting for that sync to complete until we actually start processing the data. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go down to our contact center one right here. I'm going to click on my contact center. We're going to rinse and repeat. You'll notice that this auto fills. The database name auto fills. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want because, again, our Webex calling and our Webex contact center are going to share the same database. We click Save and Continue. And again, we don't get that create option because the database is already there. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. We click Activate. And then we click Schedule Our Sync. I'll try to rush through this one so I can kind of show you what it might look like. And there we go. You'll notice that this guy still says disabled. Why? Because now it's doing the contact center sync. In other words, we're not going to start processing that contact center data until we have a sync. The same way we don't process the Webex data until we have a sync. So we just let this guy finish, and lo and behold, once it finishes, it automatically flips to enabled, and now I have my data available.